Okay, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? Happy Tuesday to all of you. KC's here. Good morning, KC. Good morning, Jenna. Good morning, Mashid. Good morning, Monica. Good morning, Baha. Um, there's Karen. Good morning, Karen. Um, so which which emoji describes your mood this morning? I'm gonna go I'm gonna go with this guy. I'm gonna go with the slightly crazy guy. Good morning, Jimmy. So what emoji describes you this morning? What emoji describes you this morning? Good morning, Erica. Or hello, Erica. Good evening, Erica. Casey looks pretty happy. That's good. How's Karen? Karen has no mouth. I don't know what that means, but can't be good. Can't be good, Karen. Hello, Ivan. Hello. So, what we'll do today? Um, that one doesn't up, but that one doesn't come up, Baha. But I think it's a good one, right? You're a cat in a box. Okay. Cats in boxes are happy usually, so that's a good one. Jenna looks pretty happy. That's good. Um, what we'll do today is we will finish up talking about the T word, the documentary that we saw yesterday. Finish talking about that, and we'll use that to kind of springboard into an article I would like you to read. And good morning, Thika. Good morning. Good evening. Sorry. Good evening. Um, we'll springboard into an article that I would like you to read, and the article is. I don't know if you'll read it and you'll feel like, oh, this isn't a big deal, or maybe you will feel like it's a big deal, but there are some kind of interesting themes that we can talk about within that article. So I think it's worth reading, and the person who the article refers to is kind of worth talking about as well, because he's grown fairly popular, and we should talk a little bit about who he is, I think. Um, Okay, so what we'll do first maybe is I just want to talk to you quickly about the first micropaper because I want to assign you another one. Um, but I took a long time to kind of get the marks out for this one, and again, I apologize for that. And well, here's what was going on with that. So what I asked you to do, of course, is to find a short paper that summarize or write a short paper. I'm sorry, that summarized an article that discusses stereotypes, prejudice, or discrimination. That's what I asked you to do before, right? And so I kind of asked you to go through these steps. I asked you to find an article and then figure out the argument and then summarize it, provide your perspective, do a short introduction and conclusion, and then cite your source with MLA format. Okay, so a couple of things went wrong, and they went wrong not because of you, they went wrong because of me. Um, I do want you to be able to do all of these things. I do want you to be able to do all of these steps. But I feel like the finding of a credible argument, I can't talk, haha. Finding a credible article with an argument in it, um, that was a more difficult task than I think I realized. Um, so some people went out and found articles that were pretty good. Some people went out and found articles that did not ultimately work for them. Some people had an article with an argument in it, but it really was, the argument wasn't stated very clearly, so it was really difficult to tell what it was and where it was. And so as I started marking these, I felt like, oh, I've made a mistake. I've asked too much. The finding of the article um, is a skill we haven't built yet, and it's a little too challenging, I think. So kind of the way I marked it, I kind of took a step back and I marked it more as an article summary. Okay, so did you find an article that we can believe, right? That's credible and that's reliable. Did you understand the article? Did you summarize it well? And did you offer your own perspective on the issue? And did you cite your source? Okay, so I kind of took a step back and I didn't mark your ability to find the argument as much as I wanted to, just because, again, finding an article with a good, strong argument is not sometimes as easy as you might think. And so I marked it much more easily because of that. And again, that's kind of my fault. I think I asked too much of you right at the beginning. And so I apologize for that if you struggled with that or if you stressed about it. Because I think that was too much. But the rest of it we can definitely do. And you did. So again, I marked you more based on something like this. So did you read the article? Did you understand it? And did you do a good job of summarizing what the article said, whether you got the argument exactly right or not? Did you provide your personal perspective on the issue? And we'll talk about that a little more today. And your introduction and conclusion, I asked you to add those, of course, which you all did. And good morning, Duong. And did you cite your source in MLA format? I think most people included a citation of some type. Some people nailed the MLA format. Some people got it just a little bit wrong, but mostly correct. And some people, I think there's some people that might not have cited their source at all, but you always have to cite your source, okay? You always have to do that. So let me see. Oh, okay, that was the last thing. Okay, so maybe at the end of class, I'll come back to the next micro paper that I would like you to write, but that one will be more in line with the way that I marked this one. So again, I'll be looking for you to find an article, properly summarize it, but I'll be looking more at your response. So how do you respond to the article? Do you agree or disagree? And in agreeing or disagreeing, are you able to use some of the knowledge that we have learned in social justice? So can I see some evidence of what we've learned in this class? Can I see that in your writing? But we can get to that a little bit later. Good morning, Justin. We'll get to that a little bit later, okay? But for the moment, let's dive in here. So this whole thing that we were kind of talking about was based on, I was going to say confusion, but maybe confusion is not the word. Maybe what the word is well, maybe it is confusion between sex and gender, right? Between someone's biological, physical body and between the way that they identify themselves inside, the way that they feel. Good morning, Banamere. And so we said sex had to do with, and not the sex you do, the sex that you are. This sex had to do with your biology and your physical body. Gender had to do with your identity and the way that you sort of presented yourself to society. That's gender. And we said that sex is a biological thing, right? It involves our genes and chromosomes and our physical cells, our physical bodies. But Gender is something a little bit different, right? Gender is a cultural construct. Culture kind of tells us, for the most part, excuse me, for the most part, how men and women should be, right? Again, of course, there are biological differences, right? Women give birth to babies and men cannot, right? That's not a cultural determination. That's a biological one. But lots of the other things we think about in terms of how men should be and how women should be are rules that our culture has made up. And we came up with lots of those rules when we did the little activity with the alien, right? All of those rules that we taught the alien, all of those rules that we came up with in order to get the alien to blend in, those rules aren't biological, right? Those rules are cultural, right? Our culture has taught us that this is what a woman or a girl is like, and this is what a boy or a man is like. And so we try to teach the alien the same things. But again, those are cultural rules, right? And we've made those rules up. We've created them as a culture. So the question here, I think the open question for Western society is, how many genders do we actually have? I mean, traditionally we had two genders. We had men and we had women. But as this documentary showed us, we have people that are different. We have people that do not perfectly fit into either of those categories. And so we were using terms like this, right? We were saying that when someone's sex assigned at birth and their gender identity, when those are the same, we call those people cisgender. And so I am a cisgender person, or I am a cis male or cis man, however you want to say it. But in the documentary, we met lots of people who were transgender, right? Where their gender identity was actually different from the sex they were assigned at birth, right? And so part of the struggle that these kids encountered was that they were born into societies where people around them were trying to enforce the gender roles that they were assigned at birth, right? And so if somebody was born as a little girl or a little boy, people around them and society as a whole was trying to get them to follow their gender roles, their gender script, right? They were trying to get them to behave in accordance with their gender role, right? And so that was kind of how socialization played a role in the lives of these young people, right? They were born into societies where the societies tried to get them to be the gender that they were according to their sex assigned at birth. But interestingly, many of these young people knew from a very early age what their gender actually was. And so and I think that was I'm probably going to sneeze in a second. That was very interesting, I think, because again, even though let's take Zoe, for instance, the young girl who liked to wear pink and got the leadership award. Zoe always seemed to know that she was a girl, even though when she was born, her sex assigned at birth was a boy, a male. She was born into a male body. All the people around her were treating her as a boy, but from a very young age, she knew that she was a girl, right? And that's a very interesting thing, because she wasn't taught to be a girl, right? People were trying to teach her to be a boy, and something inside her said, actually, no, what girls are doing over there and how girls are over there, that's more who I am, right? And so it's very different, or it's very interesting, and these young people seem to figure out their gender at different points in their lives. Some seem to know a little earlier than others, but it's very interesting that even though society and families are trying to socialize these kids according to the gender or according to their sex assigned at birth, they seem to know that they are different, that something's different, right? We said that I've got a few questions here that I want to just summarize very quickly. Okay, we said that Kai, the basketball player, was asked a lot of questions about his gender identity and not so much about basketball. And we said that, yes, people were probably curious about what was going on for him. Not everyone has met someone who is transgender and has transitioned from one gender to another. Yeah, they probably had questions. Yes, they were probably curious. But again, there is a line, right? There is a line of what's respectful and what's not, right? And when you sort of go into asking questions about people's sexuality and their, genitalia, that's over the line, right? For anyone. You don't ask those things of Kobe Bryant, and you don't ask those things of Kai, right? So, but Kai got asked those questions simply because of Kai's gender identity, right? The other thing we said at number 6, we said that was interesting too, is that some of the guys were uncomfortable with Ari's presence in the locker room, right? But again, there's a little bit of confusion there, right, between sexuality and gender. And I think we came to the conclusion that we have separate change rooms because of the sex thing, right? It's not so much gender. It's about, you don't want guys looking at girls changing, and you don't want girls looking at guys changing, right? So we separate them out. But again, we don't separate them according to sexuality. We separate them according to gender, and then we just assume that everyone is heterosexual, which they're not, right? And so that's kind of where these guys were confused, because Ari's in the changing room and they're uncomfortable, but we know that Ari is heterosexual, right? Ari is attracted to women. We see him very interested in his friend Rachel, right? So Ari is not looking at any of the other guys in the change room because his sexuality is the same as theirs. And so really there shouldn't be an issue there. But people sometimes get confused between gender and sexuality, and sometimes they assume that because you are one gender, you must be of a particular sexuality. And we know that that's not true either, right? And so we see that confusion occurring with some of the male students in Ari's class, right? They're for some reason worried that Ari's going to look at them changing, but again, Ari isn't interested in guys, and so he's not looking, right? We talked a little bit about something called passing privilege, right? The idea that some transgender people can blend into society much more easily as expressing their gender identity on the inside. And of course, that depends on a number of things. It depends on just your physical body and what it looks like. Is it, can you convince people that you are a man or a woman with your physical body very easily, or is it more difficult to convince them? Also, some of it has to do with transitions, right? And so some young people who, some young people who are transgender and want to live their lives according to their gender identity on the inside, some of them can take hormones prior to puberty. And so if you do that, your body will not change according to your gender, right? So if you're a male, for instance, and you hit puberty, your voice will get lower, you might get a little more muscly, you might get a little more hairy. And so if your gender identity is if you're a woman inside, you might not want those things to happen. And so if you take hormones prior to puberty, then your body will not go through those changes that make your body more male, more masculine. And so again, your passing privilege has to do with your physical body, but for some people, if they start taking hormone treatments prior to puberty, even after puberty too, that can help their body to look more like the gender identity they have inside. But again, this varies. Some people, like Ari and like Shane, for instance, they just blend right in and they kind of look like any other guy. Not every transgender person is able to do that, right? So Um, we saw some pretty scary statistics about very high suicide rates amongst transgender youth, and we also saw some statistics about um, that much of the violence against LGBTQ people, so people who are lesbian or gay or bisexual, much of it is focused on transgender women. And so I do want to ask you, that last question. Just hang on a second here. I do want to ask you that last question there about Daniela, because we heard a very disturbing story of what happened to Daniela, and so she was kind of telling her story about how she was raped, and then she went to the hospital, and at the hospital they were treating her for the rape, but then she explained that when the nurse found out that she was a trans woman, the way the nurse was behaving totally changed, right? And so the nurse started to, again, those filters of stereotypes came down, right? So the nurse was seeing this woman was a rape victim, this nurse was treating this woman, Daniela, and then Daniela explained that she was a trans woman, and suddenly those filters come down, right? And then all of a sudden the nurse is seeing Daniela through those stereotypes, through those filters, right? So she's the nurse then started asking questions about, oh, well, was this sex work? Are you a prostitute? Things like that. And so obviously Daniela was very disturbed and upset by that. But you could see in her story exactly when those stereotypes started to interfere with how the nurse was interacting with Daniela. So what do you think? Why are trans women like Daniela so vulnerable in society? Why is so much violence directed their way? Why is so much violence directed their way, would you say? So Karen says, even though they can experience the difficulties women go through, they are still viewed like men. Also, there are stereotypes of them being prostitutes, and they might not get the justice they deserve. Yeah, so a couple things here. Good, that's good, Karen. Couple things here. So, yeah, in a way, they're kind of caught in between two worlds, right? They are living their, so Daniela, for instance, is living her life as a woman, and so she will encounter, some of the struggles that women encounter, but at the same time, she won't fully be accepted as a woman, right? And this is actually a discussion I was having with someone the other day. The idea that if we look at Daniela, or if we look at Laverne Cox, or if we look at Avery, who is in the film as well, the other question is, how do trans women want to be seen, right? How do they want to be viewed by society? But do women like Daniela and Laverne, do they want to be seen just as women? So do we still want to have two genders, and we just include women like Laverne and Daniela in the gender of woman, or do we want other genders? And so, do we want women and men, and then trans women and trans men? And so, women like Laverne and Daniela fit into the trans woman category. So, how many categories do we want, and where do women like Daniela and Laverne, where do they want, how do they want to be seen? What category do they want to belong to? Do they want to be seen as trans women, or do they just want to be seen as women? And that's an open question. I think. I don't think that we have sort of an understanding or a solution to what society and what trans individuals want to do. So that's a complicated question, but again, Daniela is going to deal with all the stuff that women deal with, but she's also not going to be fully accepted as a woman in all cases, and she's definitely not in the hospital. And again, there is this stereotype that as a woman, and I'll bring this up too, as a black woman, she is assumed, as a black trans woman, she is assumed to be a sex worker, and that is a stereotype that comes up with the other trans woman we met in this documentary, Lorraine. Remember Lorraine? She was from Louisiana. We saw her in the makeup store talking to the makeup person. She had started kind of a support group for other trans people in Louisiana. She was at college. She expressed the same issue, right? That when she goes out on Friday night or Saturday night and she dresses up really cute like all the other girls do, she gets a lot of police attention because a lot of policemen assume she is a sex worker, which she is not. She's going out to have a good time with her friends, right? To dance and have fun. So yeah, there's stereotypes, right? There's prejudicial ideas about who these people are. And again, sometimes they don't fit into either category very well, and so they will experience the struggles of both, or they won't be accepted as they want to be accepted. Chan says nobody cares and nobody loves you. Well, that sounds harsh, but I think it's true, right? Is that people don't often have appropriate empathy for people who are different, right? And so people like all the young people that we saw in this film are different from probably most people in a significant way, right? Being transgender is a significant difference, right? It's a very different experience than probably most of us are used to. Yeah, they want to be seen and treated as women. That's right. So yeah, it's very easy to not see transgender people as people, right? It's easy to see them as strange or weird, or lots of people view this as a mental illness. But I think, and you might disagree with me on this, but I think one of the nice things about this documentary is that it shows us that trans people are really not any different than any of us, right? We see, in all of the stories of those young people, we see them growing up. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to make friends in school and kind of be accepted. They're pursuing their goals and their dreams, right? Ari is trying to become a musician. Lorraine is going to college. Zoe was getting that leadership award. All of these people are trying to sort of pursue their lives and figure out who they are. There's dating issues as well, right? Relationship things. And so Shane and Jessica are together as boyfriend and girlfriend. Ari is, I think trying to find a girlfriend, right? Maybe Rachel. Who else do we have in there? Avery was doing some online dating, so she was trying to find someone to be in a relationship with. So none of those things are in any way strange, especially for people in that age group, right? Which is, I think, basically your age group. All of that stuff is kind of normal, right? Worrying about school, friends, trying to sort of fit in and find your place, figure out who you are, figure out what you want to do with your life, maybe a little bit of dating here and there. Those are all things that all of us deal with at that time of our life, and sometimes later too. And so, one of the things that strikes me about that documentary, and I don't know about you, is that being transgender is a very different experience in some ways, and people who are transgender have specific challenges in a society that doesn't entirely accept them. But on the other hand, they're going through and dealing with the same things that all of us deal with, right? It's the same kind of, they're having the same kind of concerns as just about everyone else at that time in their life. And so, in one way, there's a very unique experience going on here, and in another way, there's nothing really unique at all. That's just how that stage of your life tends to go, right? So there's nothing strange there at all. And I don't know if you agree with me or not, but that's one of the things that jumps out to me, is that we see, yes, a very unique experience. Being transgender is different from the experience that most people have, but in many, many, many other ways, there's not really a difference, right? They're dealing with the same things that most of us have to deal with. Okay, now that brings us to this guy here, okay? As a quick question for you, who's heard of this guy? Have you heard of this guy? Yes or no? Have you heard of Jordan Peterson? Yes or no? Okay, so Karen says no. Dika, no. Erica says no, no, no. Okay. And that's not entirely unexpected either, because he's Canadian, and Canadians pay attention to other Canadians, but outside of Canada, maybe not so much. Jordan Peterson's a Canadian, and he is a professor of clinical psychology at University of Toronto. So University of Toronto, of course, is in Toronto. It's a very big university. It's fairly prestigious, and he has some expertise in a number of different types of psychology. Okay, so he's a university professor at University of Toronto. Now, he got himself into a little bit of controversy a number of years ago, and the issue was this. We said during the T Word documentary, we were watching it, and we said that it was very important to use correct pronouns for people who are transgender. And so if you're talking to Shane or Ari said, yeah, I'm a guy, I live my life as a guy, I would like you to refer to me as a guy and say things like he and his, right? Not hers or she. And the same thing for some of the trans women that we spoke to, right? And so I'm sure Avery and Zoe and Daniela, all of them want to be referred to as she and her, right? Not as he or him, and definitely not as it, right? So we said that these were very simple words. They seemed like minor things, but actually they can be pretty hurtful, right? To have somebody simply deny your gender identity and say, no, sorry, I know you think you're a girl, but I'm going to call you a boy, right? That's kind of offensive and insulting and hurtful, right? So the whole controversy kind of started around pronouns. And so the University of Toronto recommended to all of its staff and all of its teachers that you should use the correct pronouns that students want you to use. And so if a student comes up to you and says, I want you to use he and his pronouns with me, then the staff of the university and the teachers at the university should say, okay, yeah, I'll do that, and then do it, right? So we should respect the pronouns that students want to use. Jordan Peterson decided he didn't want to do that, okay? Jordan Peterson decided that was an attack on his free speech, right? And the ability to speak freely is usually guaranteed in democracies, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So Jordan Peterson said, no, I don't want to do that, and the university cannot force me to say or not say certain things. I'm allowed to speak freely, okay? So because of that, a whole controversy erupted. There was lots of arguments back and forth. Jordan Peterson was in the middle of it, but also in the process, he became very popular and well known as well. And so before this whole pronoun disagreement, most people probably didn't know who he was. If you went to U of T and took his class, you might know who he was, but certainly the rest of Canada had no idea who Jordan Peterson was. But after this whole pronoun controversy, suddenly people knew who he was, okay? So that's just a little bit of background. What I'm going to ask you to do in a few minutes is to read this article and see if you can find two arguments, okay? Now, I'm just going to remind you very quickly. I'm asking you to think critically here, right? I'm asking you to see if things are, who's asking you to believe what and why, okay? And so, yes, for lack of a, it's more complicated than that, Karen, but it's also not more complicated than that. But we'll get to that. So remember that when we're looking for arguments, when we're looking for critical thinking, we have to look for statements of fact, right? Statements that say something is true or something isn't true. Something is the case or something isn't the case. And those statements fit together into an argument, or we can fit them together into an argument, right? So a conclusion, the thing that someone wants us to believe, and then premises, right? The statements that support that conclusion, the statements that give us a reason to believe that conclusion is true or accurate or something we should believe, okay? So yeah, premises and conclusions. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to read this article. It's an easy read. It's not difficult. And again, the article is reporting about the controversy surrounding the use of pronouns when referring to transgender and gender-neutral persons. There are two sides to this argument, right? There are Jordan Peterson's version, the Jordan Peterson's argument, and then there are various groups that are arguing against him. And so what I want you to do is basically figure out what those two arguments are, okay? So what are the two arguments? And then we can talk about, is it significant, right? Because So Karen's comment here about, he's being a crybaby over pronouns. And what's interesting is he being a crybaby because he thinks it's not a big deal, or is he being a crybaby because he thinks it is a big deal? And is it a big deal? And to whom is it a big deal? So there's lots of things to think about here. So I want you to find the two arguments, Jordan Peterson's argument and then the argument for proper pronoun use. Do you think both of those arguments are valid? And then we can talk about whether, again, if it's a significant issue. And then we can talk about how can we come to an ethical decision, okay? But for the first part, let's not worry about 3 and 4 so much. Let's just worry about 1 and 2, okay? So the article itself, actually, I'm just going to check and make sure. The article itself, the article itself is in Microsoft Teams, and so it's called "He Says Freedom, They Say Hate," and so you'll see I popped it into Microsoft Teams under Files on Sunday, and so here's what I'd like you to do. It's about time for a break, so take a 10-minute break, stretch your legs, come back from the 10-minute break, and start reading the article called "He Says Freedom, They Say Hate," okay? Just worry about the first 2 questions, so try to find the arguments in those articles, or in that article. And then, let's see, that'll take us to 9:10. Can we meet back here at 9:25 and start trying to figure out what these arguments are? I think that will work for us, okay? So the questions that you see here are also in the article document. So if you open the article, you'll see the questions at the end. Again, just worry about 1 and 2 for right now, okay? And yeah, take a 10-minute break, read the article, and then see if you can try to figure out what the 2 arguments are. Jordan Peterson's argument and then the opposing side, okay? So take a break, read the article. I'll see you back here at 9:25, okay? Okay, people, and we're back. So, as you saw in that article, it's more it's more of a report on what's happening, but it does include pieces of these two opposing sides' argument. And so, I think based on that article, I'm hoping that we'll be able to sort of put together why these two sides are saying the things that they are saying. Okay, I hope. Now, let's start with um, let's start with the conclusion of the argument that people are. So the people that oppose Jordan Peterson, the people who don't agree with Jordan Peterson, what's the conclusion of their argument? What are they trying to convince us of? What do they want us to believe? What do they want us to do? What do they want us to think? What's the conclusion of that argument, would you say? Who the people who oppose Jordan Peterson? So not Jordan, but the other side. So the other, yeah, not Jordan Peterson, the opposite side. What's their conclusion? What do they want us to? What do they want us to believe? What do they want us to think? What do they want us to agree with or to do? Yeah. What do they want us to do? What do the non Jordan Peterson people, what do they want us to do? Okay. Okay, maybe that's part of their feeling, right? Part of their feeling, because he certainly seems to have the support of some white supremacists, right? And Jordan's views seem to indicate that he is against the LGBTQ community, right? Casey says people should use pronouns that are preferred by gender neutral students and faculty. Yeah. And so, again, we didn't talk about gender neutral people very much, but there are people who do not identify really as one gender or the other, or as any gender, and so sometimes they prefer you use different pronouns, right? And so you read about that. Other thoughts about what the conclusion is to the non-Jordan Peterson argument. Okay, well, I think I'm going to go with KC's here, because I think KC, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head here. This is what they are, the non-Jordan Peterson people. This is what they're arguing. They're saying that pronouns, you should use the pronouns that people ask you to use, right? So if gender neutral students say to you, hey, I'm gender neutral, I'm gender non-binary, please refer to me this way. They're saying, you should respect that, and you should do it, okay? But what are some of the reasons for the support of that? So why should we do that, right? Because that's the next question we should ask as good critical thinkers. If people say you should use the pronouns that people ask you to use, okay, well, why? Why should we do that? Why should we do that, according to these people? So Bannemer says they are. Okay, so Bannemer says that will make them more comfortable, right? Yeah. So it'll allow them to fit in, to be integrated, right? We want to, as teachers, we want our students to feel comfortable and accepted, right? We don't want to make them feel uncomfortable, or at least any more uncomfortable than necessary. And we do want them to feel like they're part of the community, right? They're part of the group. Casey says it's a sign of respect. Okay, good. And yeah, Bannemer says the same thing. Good, it's respectful. Good. Karen says it's ethical. It's polite. A cis male wouldn't want to be called with female pronouns. Yeah, that's true too, right? What else? What else? Why else should we not, or why should we use appropriate pronouns? So yes, it's respectful. Yes, it makes people feel included. It makes people feel like they are included as part of the group. It is polite, and I guess actually in Karen's point, you could say it's what all of us expect, right? If you're a cis man or if you're a cis woman, you kind of expect people to use the appropriate pronouns for you, right? And if they don't, it's a little upsetting, or maybe even insulting, depending on how people do it, right? Yeah, it shows respect. Yeah, okay. Bannemer says, yeah, it might be offensive. Yeah, it definitely might be offensive. And again, if somebody decided they were going to refer to you by other pronouns, you might not like that very much, right? What about, what's the deal with this Bill C-16? And so a bill is in most places, a bill is what a law is before it's passed, before it officially becomes a law. It's called a bill, right? And so politicians and lawyers create bills. Here in Canada, they debate them in our House of Commons in Ottawa. Then they have a vote, and if the bill passes, then it becomes a law. It becomes something that people are required to follow. So what's the deal with Bill C-16? What's the deal with Bill C-16? Oh, hi. Hello. Hello. Do you know what Bill C-16 is? Can you help me out? Not really? Okay. Right. So Bill C-16, Casey says, is an added piece of the Canadian Human Rights Act, and it says that it prohibits discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression. So you cannot It will ensure that you cannot discriminate against people based on their being transgender, right? You cannot do that. So that might be evidence as well, right? Because why should we use pronouns? Well, the government is drafting a bill that's going to be passed, and when they pass it, it will mean that you cannot discriminate against people, and so using wrong pronouns might be viewed as discrimination, right? Hang on a sec here. In the article, it said that some transgender people and some gender non-binary people weren't coming to class during this controversy, during this thing. Why didn't they go to class? Why did these individuals not go to class during this whole controversy over pronouns? Why did they not go? Yeah, so Karen says they were receiving death threats. They experienced threats. Yes. So many of these individuals felt threatened, right? They felt that their physical safety was at risk. And so that might be another premise to our argument too, is that you should use appropriate pronouns, because when you don't, it allows other people to express their prejudices and discrimination, right? By saying that these people aren't accepted, you're saying that it's okay not to accept them, right? And so we saw that in the article, is that some of the things that Jordan Peterson was saying, white supremacists and people who didn't people who were homophobic or didn't agree with transgender people, or didn't agree to the existence of transgender people, those people felt it was okay to express their views, right? What else? Jen says, because they don't want the environment to upset them, because there will be many people talk. Yeah, that's true too, right? When everyone is talking about something that involves you, it can be very uncomfortable, right? Especially when some people might support you, but some people actually might not. And so a lot of transgender people who, to some extent, were probably just trying to blend in and sort of go about their school lives and go to their classes and do their work, suddenly they are in the middle of this thing that everyone's talking about, right? And that can be really uncomfortable. So we see here that I think we have an argument developing about using pronouns. Why should we use pronouns? Well, it shows respect, right? It's polite. It shows inclusion, right? It shows that we accept these people for who they are. It's university policy, right? The university has said this is what we want our staff and our instructors to do, so it's university policy. There is a Bill C-16, or there was a Bill C-16 that was going to make it illegal to discriminate against people based on their gender identity, and not using these appropriate pronouns made transgender and gender non-binary people feel very threatened, and some people actually seemed to think it was okay to threaten them because of this, right? So somebody like Jordan Peterson standing up and saying, I don't think I should have to use these pronouns, actually enabled other people who had similar views or maybe more extreme views to stand up and express theirs. And so we had death threats and kind of lots of ugly language around that. So I think that's kind of the Jordan Peterson argument here, is that you should use pronouns. It's respectful. It shows inclusion. It makes transgender and gender non-binary people feel safe, and as teachers, that's what we want. We want students to feel safe. And not using them might be it's against university policy. It might be against the law if that bill gets passed, or when that bill gets passed. And not using those pronouns encourages some people with very extreme views to start speaking up and sending death threats and things like that. Okay, so I think that's the one side of the argument. Now, I want to press pause on that. Because I want to talk really quickly about the next micro paper I would like you to do. Okay, so here it is. Nope, that's not it. Here it is. And it's very similar to the last one. It's basically one page. If you go a little bit over one page, that's okay. Don't worry. It doesn't have to fit on one page, but that's roughly the length it should be. Again, I want you to summarize an article, and I want you to summarize an article that discusses some aspect of sexism or gender issues or LGBTQ rights or experiences or something, okay? Something to do with a social justice issue connected to sexism or gender or sexuality, LGBTQ sexuality, okay? Again, I want you to be able to find a good article. I want you to be able to read it, to understand it, to summarize it properly, and then I want you to be able to respond to it, okay? So I want you to be able to say what you think about the article and the issues that the article raises. I want you to be able to say that in your own voice, and I want you to be able to do so using the knowledge and the concepts and the perspectives that we've learned in this class, okay? So this assignment is similar to the last one with just a slightly different focus, okay? There's more focus on summarizing and understanding and then responding to what is said rather than looking at the argument, okay? So this one is a little bit different that way. So again, how should you go about doing this? Well, very similar to last time, I want you to find a credible article. So an article that we can believe, right? That is written by a credible, informed source or person. Make sure the article has some analysis, okay? So, if you just go to a news site like CTV, often news sites will tell you just kind of the basics, right? They'll say what happened and who it happened to and where and when it happened. And then that's it. But we want something that's a little more in depth, right? Something that has a little bit of analysis, something that tells you a little about the why and the how of something, okay? And so many of you for the last paper actually did a really good job of finding articles that were like that had some level of analysis. They were trying to not only say what happened, but they were trying to understand why things were happening. They were trying to explain the reasons for something, okay? So that's kind of the type of article that I would like you to find. And again, if you think you find an article and you're not sure about it, you can always just send me the link and say, hey Mike, is this going to work for me? And I can give you a quick yes or no, okay? And that may help you. And so you'll read the article, you'll write an article summary that sort of explains what the article talks about. And then, of course, I want you to provide your personal perspective on the issue, okay? So how does this article relate to you? Does it say things that you think are important? Do you agree or do you disagree with what the article says and why? And can you respond to the article in a way that shows me that you are learning something in this class, okay? Um, so you'll do that. You'll write a short introduction and conclusion like you did last time, and most of you did a really good job with that. And again, you'll cite your source with MLA format. So your paper will look kind of something like this. You'll have a really short intro. You'll summarize the article. You'll respond to it in a thoughtful, intelligent way. Really quick conclusion, and then you'll cite your source, okay? So this assignment, this page here that you see is in Student Portal, so you can have a look at it. And I'll talk a little bit more about it. I'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow because we're sort of out of time, and I know we're halfway through this Jordan Peterson thing. But I did want to assign that to you right away so that you could get working on it, because we're a little bit behind, and again that's my fault. But we'll try to fix that. Okay, so I will talk a little bit more about the paper tomorrow, but I just wanted to get it in front of you right now. Okay. When will we be working on it? Well, you can work on it whenever you want. I will probably give you some class time to work on it this week. Maybe Thursday, maybe Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not sure. I'll let you know. Oh no, it won't be tomorrow. It'll be Thursday, probably Thursday or Friday, that I'll give you some time to work on it. But until then, at least you kind of know what it is. You can go to Student Portal and look at it, and you might want to do a little search and see if you can find an article that will work for you. And again, most of you did a good job finding articles like this last time, so if you kind of were successful, then kind of do the same thing, but find an article that relates to something to do with discrimination or inequality or prejudice around sex or gender or sexuality. Okay. All right. I'm going to leave it there because we've got like a minute left. Tomorrow I'll talk about the micropaper thing again. And then we'll continue on and we'll try to piece together this argument from Jordan Peterson. And then we'll talk a little bit about, I believe, sexism and social messaging in movies, which might be interesting. So until then, I'll leave it there. Some of you I'll see in 10 minutes in comparative cultures. Some of you I'll see tomorrow. So for those of you who participated in the live chat today, thank you very much. You did a really good job. Yes, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Okay, so bye.